I think there's loads of things we can do without spending a penny, whether that's mindful breathing, which we talked about, 5 minutes of focused breathing every day, whether it's embracing nature. I know you're a big fan of grounding, whether it's cultivating gratitude. Again, that can be free and you do that every day with your family, how we have done for many, many years. Or even if it's actually doing the opposite of what we talk about with gadgets and actually taking a digital detox routine, again, sort of removing those devices can be really good for well-being.
The reality is none of what you buy in the health space is really necessary, because it's only necessary because we have taken away things. It's not even that necessary, even though we've taken away things. It's just because we've taken away things like natural light, we've taken away things like movement. All of these things we've taken away. Now, most of my philosophy, I've worked out over the last 15 years, I've been trying to dial in what I really teach. Yeah, I teach about health, well-being, I teach about how to feel superhuman. This is all correct, but I think what resonates with a lot of people when I teach them is what I'm really trying to teach is integrative mindfulness, integrative exercise. So how can we integrate things?
Harry, hello again, sir. Welcome back to Mindful Parts. How you doing, sir? Good week?
Yeah, I've had a good week. I've been down in Brighton this week. So other than one day, I think I've been in the sea every day. The sea is getting really warm. So between 19 and 22 each time I'm going in. So obviously just going in trunks, having a 10, 15, 20 minute swim in the mornings after a little bit of a workout. I've still got quite a significant toe injury. I think I might have mentioned it last time. Yeah. I'm going to go and see the musculoskeletal person actually after our call, which is why I have to duck out. I've been waiting for, I think, 4 weeks for that. It's getting better, but it's still a bit annoying because I can't flex my toe at all or do anything that involves like a lunge or even walking properly. So I'm always walking on the outside of my foot, and that's then impacting my ankle and all that. But other than that, so that's why I like to see, because you go in and you don't have any issues. And I bought a new pair of, I'm a big fan of the barefoot trainers. And so I'm a big fan of Vivo Barefoot, even though they don't sponsor this podcast yet. But I've been wearing them since, 2013. So I bought their water shoes the other day, which are basically plastic, but they've got like massive holes so that you can go in the water, come out, and it all dries. And actually, it's really good because it meant that I can just be in my trunks, put those trainers on, cycle down to the beach. I can go into town. I don't have to think about having different stuff. I don't need anything. I just can jump in the sea whenever I fancy it. So I'm loving that. How about you, mate? What's going on?
I'm good, mate. I'm defying, in my own way, defying doctor's orders. I've started the HIIT workouts again. I've decided that I've just put on too much weight and lost too much fitness that I know I'm not supposed to do anything until I have my final consultation, which is the end of July, particularly HIIT workouts, anything too strenuous in the heart. But I've decided to meet in the middle. So I don't know if you remember Insanity. We did it years and years ago, a long program.
Yeah, you did it as well.
Great. I've done it a couple of times. And I thought, well, I won't go full Insanity, right? Because that is pretty hardcore for those who haven't done it. With Sean T, who I absolutely love. I think he's a genius at what he does. But I'm doing the Insanity 30, which means it's Insanity, but only for 30 minutes every morning. And you know what? It is intense. I'm not going to lie. Like, I am dripping with sweat by the end of it. I am not fit. All my fitness has literally gone. Really? So I've just started that again. I feel great for doing it.
I might have to
do that.
You, actually,
jump into the ice bath afterwards, 6-7 minutes, and happy days. And it's really good for my mental health. I feel like I'm getting fit again, which just makes me feel more upbeat, stronger, more fun, more lively, all those things. So you forget how much you've missed it till you're doing it again. So it's been nice.
It's like the frog in boiling water when it comes to fitness and not doing things. Like I don't like day to day. I don't notice it because as it drips off. But like I said, the last 4 weeks I have been really impacted with the toe. And then only this week I got back on the rebounder, because rebounding or bouncing is quite hard, obviously, because the toe moves a lot. So I'm doing it very gradually, but I did a session the other day, 30 minutes of that plus about some other mobility, and I felt good. And you go, oh, this is how I'm supposed to feel, as opposed to it's a slow drop off.
It's the mobility bit that I've noticed the most. I've been doing this now since we last recorded, so the last 10 days or so, solid. And although there's no kind of stretching in it, it's a mobility workout at the start. It's all jump, it's all HIIT stuff. So it's constant plyometrics, constant jumps, hops, skips, press up, all that kind of stuff. And you get 30-second rest and you're back in for full 30 minutes. And you get 30 seconds rest off every 5. But I've noticed my mobility improve, even though I'm not doing stretching. Like the first few sessions, I was so stiff, trying to reach down to touch the floor when you're doing little frog hops and stuff. Whereas now I'm starting to feel like I can do it a little bit easier. I'm still sweating as much. I'm not getting quite so tired, not so drained. And of course, you get the afterburn thermo effect then for the rest of the day. And I'm feeling, I did this 2-3 hours ago now, at the time we record this, and I feel good. But interesting point for today. We had some listener feedback, and it's relevant because already today on this show, you've mentioned some new flip flops from Breathwork, which sound like they do a really good job at releasing the water. You get down there easily, but there's a cost to buying those.
By the way, not shoes.
Shoes. Okay, yeah. So I've mentioned my ice bath, which I use at home. I'm obviously using an app to get the Insanity 30 piece, but there's a subscription to getting that. But ultimately, the listener came back. I'm going to read it out because we love listener feedback. And if anyone wants to give us feedback, we have an Instagram channel, which is mindful_pass_podcast. So we've got actually a listener that supports us with that channel. There's a lot of the content. If you have any questions, go and find us on Instagram and let us know. But this question came in. I'm going to read it out in its entirety because I think it's a really great post, and B, hopefully, if this is what this listener's asking for, maybe others are as well. So it says, I've been catching up on your latest podcast episodes, and you've been asked for some listener suggestions. So here's something I've picked up, and it's a recurring theme in health and wellness industries: the wealth divide and being able to buy yourself healthy in terms of mind, body, and spirit, e.g., by investing in supplements, tech, ice baths, saunas, retreats, apps, and more. Much of what you and Harry talk about may feel inaccessible to many. So in the interest of demonstrating that maintaining peak mental health and fitness can be accessible to all, I'd love an episode where you focus on bringing it back to basics in terms of financial outlay. By no means a criticism, just another angle to consider, and hopefully this wouldn't alienate other regular listeners. I thought, that we actually end up in a really good conversation over time, which I think I shared some of the responses with you as well, Harry. And I thought, you know what, let's strip it back, and maybe that's a great thing to talk about on the show. Obviously, in my response to the listener, I said it's a really good debate. It really does depend on what the outcomes that you're driving for. Is it short-term or long-term health, feeling or measuring difference? Are you seeking physical or psychological improvements, or both? Are you focused on performance now or aiming to biohack your life later? Are you predominantly indoors or outdoors, as many gadgets exist to replace outdoor benefits that not everyone can access? And do you have lots of time, or are you time crunched, as many gadgets exist to help you achieve more in less time? How quickly do you want to see results? And do you have the budget to expedite that? So much to consider, but I love the question, and we'll definitely be addressing this in our next episode. So with that in mind, Harry, over to you. I know we both got some strong thoughts on this.
As you were reading that out, you probably didn't notice because you were looking at your sheet as I was drinking some water, and then I suddenly realised I'm holding this bottle, which for those watching is my hydrogen
bottle, which we discussed about in 2 episodes ago, I think.
I gave one to my sister for her 50th birthday, and I also got my other sister to give one to her husband, although he's not super keen on it. I'm not sure he's convinced on it, but I'm trying to send him all the studies. And I was drinking this, and I was thinking, I'm drinking a bottle which costs a ridiculous amount of money for a bottle. And so, yes, our listener has a great point, right? Because here I am drinking this. But as I was saying to you off air beforehand, almost all of my philosophy, like the BEAT model, the leadership meat model, everything in there really is accessible for zero money. Most of the health practices, and your response was absolutely correct, right? Are you looking to do more in less time? Are you looking to do X, Y, Z? The goals are really important, but the reality is none of what you buy in the health space is really necessary, right? Because it's only necessary because we have taken away things. It's not even that necessary, even though we've taken away things. It's just because we've taken away things like natural light. We've taken away things like movement. All of these things we've taken away. Now, most of my philosophy, I've worked out over the last 15 years. I've been trying to dial in what I really teach. Yeah, I teach about health, well-being. I teach about how to feel superhuman. This is all correct, but I think what resonates with a lot of people when I teach them is what I'm really trying to teach is integrative mindfulness, integrative exercise. So how can we integrate things? And even off air, I was telling you that the reason I like these shoes, for example, these water shoes, is I'm making life as easy as possible for myself in that I don't need a second pair of shoes because I can wear those in the water, go out, walk to Brighton, come back, jump in the sea again. I want to make things as simple and as easy as possible for me. And so it has to be the path of least resistance. And so sometimes these gadgets like new shoes will help with that. But other times, you don't need any of that and just go barefoot. The reason I've got the shoes is just because I've got my bust up toe at the moment. So I think my starting point is it's all about integrating things into your normal life, and none of what we buy is really necessary, but it can be a little bit easier to do things. So that'd be my first starting point.
I think you've nailed a really good point there, which comes down to the why. As you know, I'm a huge fan of Simon Sinek's work and his why and purpose. And interestingly, because you raised it, as I said, myself and the listener went back and forth with a really great conversation. But when we talk about the why, one of my responses said, let me see if I can find it here. I love the question. Okay, so I gave an example here of the Brownlee triathlete brothers. Now, obviously, I'm a triathlete. I love the Brownlees. They're brilliant. They're gold medalist triathletes, for those that aren't familiar. Interestingly, they never train together with any data. So it's quite well known. They'll go out, cycle as brothers. They don't take watches. They don't take their Garmin's on their bikes. They just train out in the open. They have a good sense of, what their rough exertion levels are, their RPE levels are, things like that. But they'll train quite hard. However, when it comes down to them having to get ready for race day, for the Olympics, well, they train with all the data that they need, because those seconds make a difference. You can't just go necessarily by feel. You need to know that your body is in absolute optimum shape, that you can achieve when it comes down to hundredths or tenths of a second. You need every advantage you can. So I think that's a good example of their why is different. Now it comes down to the journey then for the listeners have and what they want to take and what you want to obtain. So I think when we've identified the question of the why, then it comes down to what lifestyle changes, whether they're diets, psychological, cognitive, whether you need more experience in nature, whether it's social, whether you need love, whether it's headspace, really comes down to the removal of those stresses. And that's often where gadgets, as you mentioned, can help, right? So really interestingly, and it's not too dissimilar to your beat model, which we talk about a lot here. I'm a big fan of Simon Ong's book, Energize. Like I mentioned on the show maybe a year ago now. But he talks about 5 key buckets that we need in order to live an optimal life. And they're not too dissimilar to what you believe in the beat model. But he has the physical buckets. That's your sleep, exercise, and nutrition. Your mental, which is learning, focus, and curiosity. Your emotional, which is your positive mindset, processing feelings. Social, which is societal, which is uplifting relationships and connections. And then purpose, doing meaningful, purpose-driven work. And across those 5 buckets, he said, a bit like you, when we talk a lot about when your social bucket is a little bit empty, you need to work on that. Those things don't necessarily need gadgets. They're things that we know we need to do inside ourselves to fill those buckets. I think there's loads of things we can do without spending a penny, whether that's mindful breathing, which we talked about, 5 minutes of focused breathing every day, whether it's embracing nature. I know you're a big fan of grounding, whether it's cultivating gratitude. Again, that can be free, and you do that every day with your family, Harry, have done for many, many years. Or even if it's actually doing the opposite of what we talk about with gadgets and actually taking a digital detox routine, which again, sort of removing those devices can be really good for well-being. I think there's loads of free things we can do to optimize health. Gadgets, as you mentioned, can come in depending on what our why is. Where do we want to get to? So I've just started my routine again because I know I've got an Ironman race in Weymouth coming up in September. I'm in no shape at the minute to perform at the level that I want to. So I'm going to use gadgets and certain tools to help expedite my ability to get from A to B. Also, I'm a big fan of, I'm very curious. So I love looking at the data. I love looking at my sleep metrics. I like looking at those things because that curiosity inspires me and helps me in my day-to-day life. You don't need those things. None of this is coming from a place of need. They're all coming from a place of awareness of where I want to get to and can they help me along in the journey. For me, and we live very different lives, I spend 10 hours a day sat down. Now, I could invest in a treadmill walking desk or certain things. I've actually invested in a standing desk, which really helps me at work, just at least stay on my feet a bit more. But when you're doing 10 hours a day, then I'm limited with my family time and other things. I've got to make sure that in my head, I can maximize my ability to almost biohack my way to optimal health and vitality. And I use gadgets and certain supplements and things to assist with that. But you can absolutely get all the benefits of the supplements I take through organic food, through growing your own food, to better lifestyle choices. I could drink more water. There's loads of things I could do more to even improve it further. But I think it's a great bit of feedback from one of the guests, though, or listeners rather. And I'm really excited that they brought it to the table.
I think so. Yeah, it's interesting because one of the things you mentioned is, you sit down for like 10 hours a day. I tend to be moving throughout the day because I'm not often at the desk a huge amount. But then you add, say, the treadmill desk, you add the this, that, the other standing desks to compensate for that. And I'm a mathematician, physicist by history in terms of my GCSEs, A levels, and degree, and so I like equations, right? And I think I've shared this with you before, and I'll share it with the listeners again. If we have an equation, H, like H as in Harry, equals H, right? But H does not stand for Harry; it stands for health, right? So health equals health, right? H equals H. And then on the left side of the equation, let's add a letter, right? Let's add, for example, the letter L. So now we've got H plus L. That clearly doesn't equal H on the right hand side. Okay, so in order to make that meet, right, really we should take the L away, right, and then H will equal H again, right? But what we do is we add C. So what do I mean by all these letters, right? Imagine the L stands for late night. Then instead of take the late night away to go back to health, what we do is we add C, which is the coffee, right, to wake you up in the morning. So we keep adding. So for example, you've had H equals H, but now you've got H plus S. So S is sitting down, right? So instead of taking away the sitting down, what you're doing is you're adding another S for standing desk, right? So you go H plus S to try and equal H, whereas really you should take away that first S. Hopefully listeners are paying attention with my equation. So my point is, this is society in general. Instead of taking away the problems, what we try and do is add solutions which then create more problems. Whereas really what we need to do is take away the root cause. However, we live in the real world. One of the things I learned in my Vipassana meditation was see the world as it is, not as you want it to be. Even though you want to see it in a better way, but you have to start off with seeing it as it is. So right now you are in the situation where you're sitting down for 10 hours a day. So therefore that's not going to change. You've got a business to run, you've got employees, you've got all of this sort of stuff. And so you are going to look for solutions. But I mean, going back to the listener and people listening, I do feel there's a huge valid point here in that there's this commoditization or this increase in wellness. I hate the word wellness, which is why I tend to use well-being. Wellness to me is this industry of trying to monetize everything, right? From now, every week there's a new kombucha or health drink or whatever. Gwyneth Paltrow with her Goop and all this kind of stuff is popularized all these things. And it becomes really, for the layperson, because I see a lot of my friends and family who just watch these things and they're going, making wellness really expensive when it doesn't have to be. It's just that as humans, we try to monetize anything and everything. So that
Not just monetize. I think we live now in a society where we want everything instantly. We live in a world of Netflix being, films being instant, taxis being instant with Uber, hotels being instant. We can book it through, the biggest hotel company in the world doesn't own any hotels. That's bookings.com, right?
Basically, people want the result without doing the work a lot of the time.
That's why Ozempic's been so popular, right? Look at Ozempic. It's everywhere. It's on every Instagram channel you can find. And it's what
was I watching the other day about Ozempic or Wegovy, where they're now saying, there's big pancreatic problems or whatever.
Yeah. But people want the instant gratification now.
Yeah.
It's interesting, though, because if you practice gratitude, I know we do it differently. I do it through my storytelling diary, and you do it through an actual gratitude diary with your family. But the idea of both is gratitude is what turns everything we have into being enough. So you don't need the gadgets if you practice it fully. And yet a lot of people listen to this. Maybe they are in that. I don't know if the listener has a gratitude diary, but that's something or practices gratitude daily. But that's something that you can absolutely do for free. I think what's interesting on the digital side of things, everyone knows that you need to sometimes disconnect to reconnect. That's what holidays do. We go away because we need to disconnect from work, those 10-hour days, all of our emails, so that we hopefully can reconnect, not just with ourselves, but with our family, with nature, with peace sometimes. And we also know as well the mind benefits from stillness.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to be said about stripping things back.
I saw a post today actually about, I think it was Stanford University, who paid 3,500 students or 3,500 people to go off social media for 6 weeks. They're just told to delete their apps. And the obvious happened, right? They reported feelings of being happier, less depressed, less anxious. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket science to work that out.
No.
And so, disconnecting. I mean, again, but what
better study would be to see how quickly they return to their devices despite confirming the benefits.
Is that I try, and in my book that is almost done, and you'll be able to read it soon, I talk about this thing called digital nutrition. as opposed to digital detox or something like that, because or digital fasting, because yes, people can go and just go without for like 3 days on a digital detox, but my thing is, the reality is you're going to live with the phone or live with technology day in, day out. So how do you manage that in a way that's going to actually serve you, rather than like make you like more anxious or anything like that? But a couple of things I did want to mention, where you were talking about your training for your triathlon, and one of my favorite quotes that I mention all the time when it comes to tracking is Peter Drucker's quote, which I'm sure you've heard, the management guru, where you can't manage what you don't measure. And so in order to manage your time, manage your performance, you need to measure it in some way. Now, that does not need to have a £600 Garmin watch. So for our listener, who I think she was saying that she was, the last year, maybe she was stripping back to basics for
Yeah.
I think it felt better. That could be when you go for your walk up that local hill. When you get to the top, do you feel like you can have a conversation with your friend that maybe you went for a walk with, or do you feel not? And that's your measurement, where actually, when I started doing this 6 weeks ago, I couldn't have that conversation at the top. Now I can have that conversation at the top. So it doesn't have to be with a, it can be a subjective measure. And they've got this thing that I'm sure you're familiar with, RP, rate of perceived exertion. Where,
RPE. I mentioned it earlier.
yeah, I thought you mentioned it earlier. Then I wasn't sure whether you said RPM or something. But yeah, RPE. So your rate of perceived exertion, which I think I talk about in my first book, The Thought Gym, where, if you're at level 6, that's where you can sort of just about have a conversation. With someone as you're doing. If you're like a level 8 or 9, which sounds like you would be at that Insanity 30, you can't really have that conversation with anyone, right? And so there are different ways of you tracking things and measuring things so you can see that you've got progress. But I think it would be useful for the listeners to let's list a few common expensive things that maybe people do. What would be the free version of it? So a classic one, you've got the ice bath, right? We were talking about this off air before you came on. You're now up to an amazing 8 minutes. Is it 8 minutes?
And now I do 6.5 minutes now at 8 degrees.
At 8 degrees. 6.5 minutes at 8 degrees, which is intense, right? I'm doing about 10 minutes in 20-degree water at the moment.
I'll tell you what was interesting here, just while it's fresh, and it's completely off piece, so apologies. But we went to Centre Parks at the weekend with the family, right? And that is expensive, to be fair. Everything costs, but I've never been before. And they have a great rapids pool. We went to the Longleat one, but they have a plunge pool. And I was watching all these people get in and just dipping their toe in and going, "Oh my God, it's too cold," jumping out. And it was a real thing. I thought, I've got to give this a go. Jumped in, and honestly, I was like, I can tell I've started to get better, because I jumped in. It almost felt warm, because it must have been around about 12 degrees. I've been doing obviously 8 degrees every morning. And I jumped in and I was like, wow, this is actually quite relaxing. And I said to my wife, had I not done this, obviously I would have jumped in like everyone else and jumped straight back out again. It's amazing how quickly your body does start to adapt. But it was nice to have a measure. Talking about the measuring piece, managing that progress. I was able to measure my progress by a comparison piece, really. Looking at everyone else's reactions versus my own, and feeling very, very comfortable in the colder water. So that was I felt quite good about that. I was also a little bit disappointed I didn't get the same level of excitement everyone else did when they dipped themselves into cold water. But I also, in reverse, I felt pretty good that my body had obviously started to adapt to the cold.
Well, the thing is, it's all relative, right? Because that is warm relative to what you're used to, right? We live in a relativistic universe. I keep saying to people, right? No one is tall. Someone is tall compared to relative to someone who's short. But
like, I'll cut you off.
Going back to the ice bath is that's not, they're expensive. We won't ask you how much they cost, but they're expensive, right? But you don't need to do that, right? You can do simple things like a cold shower. Not even a cold shower. You can have 30 seconds of cold. You can actually put your face, you can get a bowl with water, cold water, and a few ice cubes, and put your face in it for a little bit, right? That has the same effect virtually as what you're doing, right? To a lesser degree.
You put your hands in as well, by the way. I think hands apparently has a better impact than face, because it's where all the blood capillaries, and it goes through your whole system. All your blood follows through your hands.
Yeah. So the point is that's basically free. Let's call it, except for the price of a bowl and maybe some ice or whatever, and the electricity to run it all. You mentioned grounding, right? One of the best things.
Before you jump to grounding, let's stick with the ice bath for a second, because there's two parts to the ice bath benefit. the first part, and we've mentioned this in the previous episode, is the idea that you obviously get used to colder temperatures and all the body adaptations that come with it, the mobilization of brown fat, the better sort of endorphins and thing that come from it, the reduction in cortisol, and all this kind of malarkey. But also, and I mentioned to you before, it's the one part for me, which is of my day now, which has got me into the regular pattern of meditation. So I will meditate now for 5 minutes. I close my eyes. I focus on a specific breathing pattern. I go 8 breaths, count of 8 in, hold for 8, out for 14, hold for 8, in for 8. So that's what I've got used to. And it's the only, on this show, we've been doing this now for a couple of years. I always said to you, I struggle to get into that regular meditative habit, even for 5 minutes a day, because there's always something else to do. I've now been consistently meditating in that way every single day I get in the ice bath. So it's forced me, because there's nothing else to do in the ice bath really, except to really try and relax your breathing. So it's like to put your head in the water. That's why I mentioned your hands as well. What you can do, of course, is for everybody, there's so many benefits to just practicing mindful breathing for 5 minutes a day. Studies show that even really brief mindfulness practices of around 5 minutes can significantly reduce stress and improve mood. And it was Tara Brach that said, mindfulness is the aware, balanced acceptance of the present experience. So I think if you combine the two as well, again, mindful breathing is completely free. You don't need a gadget to do that.
No.
I don't need the ice bath to do it, but it kind of forces me to do it because there's nothing else to do in there except realize the cold. But I think those two things could go hand in hand here. So even if you don't have an ice bath, even if you don't want to go down the cold therapy route, you can actually just sit in silence for 5 minutes and engage in good breathing exercises, which will give you a lot of the same benefits.
If you told me 10 years ago, now breathing is also something, like you said, completely free. You can do it whenever. There are people, and I know people personally, who are making huge amounts of money teaching breathing. And you think,
I know a couple.
Yeah, and they're doing great things for people. But, like, for example, the Wim Hof app, I have the free version of the app. I don't unlock. And you can get 5 free sessions a month, I think, on the breathing thing. But even if you didn't want to do that, he has a YouTube channel. And often I do that with my mum. We use the YouTube video, and it's a free breathing one where they do 3 rounds of about a minute and a half or something like that. So there is that for free. What else? Okay, the other thing, you said grounding. So grounding is effectively where you put your naked skin, whether it's your hand or your foot, usually, on the earth, on the sometimes tarmac works, but basically on the ground or the grass, and you get all these negative ions up from the earth. It's like basically a natural antioxidant flush of your system, totally free. Now, of course, right, there are devices that simulate grounding, right? I had grounding sheets, grounding pads. You can get shoe inserts that simulate the grounding. So yes, you can spend money on that, but the free version is just go out, walk barefoot more. I'm a big fan of the infrared lights. I don't think you bought.
I keep pulling you back because I think it's
right.
almost like the add-on. So even if you can't do grounding and maybe you live somewhere where you just don't want to be walking around in nature and end up with dog shit on your feet or something like that, or a spike in your foot or whatever, right? Because it's not accessible for everybody. But what I will say, and you mentioned this thing about walking up the hill and that feeling you get of achievement at the top when you suddenly start opening up with your friend. So, and actually, me and my wife have just started doing this. It's relatively new for us. We're about 3-4 weeks in. But now we decide after every single time we have dinner, we go for a very short 10-minute walk with the dog. And some of these walks now can be like 9-10 o'clock at night. We're trying to get into routine. I said, we can afford 10 minutes a night to do that before we set into our TV routine or whatever it is we do in the evenings, right? So embracing not just the grounding, but you can embrace nature with walking. 15 minutes of walking in a natural setting. It increases feelings of connectedness. We know it boosts vitality. If you're doing it in the middle of the day, you're going to get more vitamin D. It's going to help with loads of different sort of natural benefits of being outside in the open air and walking.
Yeah. So this
John Muir said that in every walk with nature, one receives far more than he seeks. And it's absolutely true, right? Me and my wife, it's not just the walking, because I'm walking with my partner. We connect, we talk. We're not, sat in front of the telly where there's no communication. We're absorbed in someone else's story. It's an opportunity for us to talk about the day, to unwind, and just to really reconnect as well. And that connectedness, of course, fills that that emotional, that spiritual, and that kind of mental health bucket. So if you look at the Energized book and the 5 buckets there, and the spiritual one as well, because we talk about the loss of my dad, we talk about things we're frightened about, things we might be anxious about. It's really therapeutic, and it's 10 minutes a day
Yeah.
of reconnecting outside with the dog. And there's endorphins there about having a dog as well. You can relate to having an animal in your life or whatever, but it's a really simple free thing. And when you start doing it, we've been doing it for 3 weeks, we wonder why we haven't done it our whole lives. It's so simple, and it's 10 minutes a day. There's almost no excuses not to do that thing.
Look, at the end of the day, what you're talking about there effectively is Shinrin-yoku, right? The Japanese term forest bathing. Again, that's something I talk about in the upcoming book. But you're hitting, like I said, so you're not in contact with the ground, so it's not the grounding piece, but it's the Shinrin-yoku or the forest bathing part, which has been shown many, many times in across multiple studies to reduce the cortisol levels and so on. But interestingly, talking about you having a chat with Lucy on your walks, I remember vaguely reading years ago now about how the benefit of having the conversation whilst walking, and one of the benefits, as opposed to having a conversation sitting down facing each other, is because you're not facing each other a lot of time when you're walking, there's sometimes an ability for some people to be more open in the conversation and less kind of combative if there's going to be a difficult, like the walking forwards and not necessarily facing each other the whole time is actually quite interesting. And I did an activity about 2 years ago, and it was at the Mind Valley University stuff, and you partnered up with someone and you were in the dark, and so you couldn't see each other, and it was someone you didn't really know, but you had like maybe 15-20 minutes to chat. The conversations flow so much differently when you don't actually have eye contact, because eye contact is really intense, as people know if they've ever tried to do staring. It's the eyes are literally the window to the soul, and you feel very exposed, very vulnerable when you do that. And so there's something about not necessarily facing the person that can allow for more open conversations sometimes to happen. So I thought I'd just bring that up, because that's what, when you were talking about walking side by side, it reminded me of that.
I agree. Well, something again, probably we talked about maybe 18 months ago. There's a Latin phrase called solvete ambulando, which is a Latin phrase that means solved by walking. And it's used to refer to a problem which is solved by walking. It's what the Romans and the Stoics and other things used to do. Solvete ambulando. I think that's correct. Or ambulando. I read about this. It's always stuck with me. It's probably the only Latin words that I know, solvete ambulando. But it stuck with me ever since I read it. I can't even remember which book I read it in, but I came across this phrase. And it literally means solved by walking.
I think
this is something that's been going on for thousands of years. People understand the benefits.
I mean,
and yet how many of us walk even on our own or with a partner or with a friend on a daily basis for 5, 10, 15 minutes? Very few of us.
I think it's the movement piece that for me is really important there, because I think one of my top 10 tips or top 10 reasons to rebound. So my most popular video on YouTube is about rebounding and the top 10 reasons to rebound. I can't remember what number it is, but whether it's number 5 or number 3 or whatever, I talk about how rebounding helps you solve problems and get into a different state. And it's the same thing with walking. It puts your brain in a slightly different pattern, slightly different frequency, which allows for that to happen. So, yeah.
You mentioned the rebounding. I'm trying to take away the gadget from the exercise, but you also teach yoga. I've done Tai Chi in the past. Lots of people do simple stretching routines. Again, that's something at home with YouTube if you need it. If you want to get into a yoga routine, you can follow yoga workouts. You can practice Tai Chi. You can do all of these things yourself, completely free at home. We know that these are known to be mindful movement practices, right? They're proven over centuries to enhance physical and mental well-being, completally free. Yeah. Again, the body benefits from movement, right?
Absolutely,
and
right.
Mind benefits from stillness.
Even when I wasn't able to do it a few weeks ago, I think I mentioned to you when I hadn't been doing my routine, I was getting stressed from things that were happening. And then I remembered, like, to do the shaking. So the shaking, for people listening, is literally you're standing and imagine you're on like one of those vibration plates that you're at the gym where it's like, blah, 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 but you're doing that without anything. And it's amazing because it's all about releasing the cortisol from your body, right? That's what the rebounding does. It's what the walking does. But you can literally just kind of like shake like this. And I would be standing and shaking and do that for 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes. You will feel really different. Again, totally free. So that is, I mean, everything is free. these technology things just add to it.
We talked before about the fact that I've got a NeuroSim device, which is a pretty expensive piece of kit. We're talking for 400-500 quid, about 400 quid, I think, which is something that stimulates the vagus nerve, right? It's really good for sleep, really good for well-being. You don't need to buy one of those things. You and I have talked about the process of humming.
Yeah, humming, yeah.
Does the same thing. So if you have the opportunity to sit down as part of your meditative practice, your yoga practice, whatever, and you can hum, literally that stimulates the vagus nerve in very much the same way. So that, again, there is a free way of doing things. I guess for me, I don't necessarily want to, full disclosure, sit there and hum. I prefer to biohack it in a way of using a gadget that allows it to do it for me. So I can actually get the same stimulation while working. So I'll continue to work. I'll have a NeuroSim device on my left earlobe, but I can answer emails and do all the things I need to do, but still getting the same benefit. So for me, I guess it's me. I'm multitasking in a way that gets me the benefit without having to physically spend the time doing the thing. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. It's the way that I've done it, but you can get the same benefit for free.
A little bit of a disclosure from my part, maybe too much information, but one of the things I sometimes do, especially if I'm feeling a little bit anxious or stressed before having a meeting or I need to get into a different state, like I've been a bit rushed to get to yoga and I want to get into the right state before I teach. When I'm in the bathroom before, like I've gone to the toilet, washed my hands, and I put the the hand dryers, right? They're quite loud and noisy, so that's when I tend to do the humming because people can't really hear the humming. So I'm like, yeah. And it takes about 30 seconds for the hands to dry or whatever. And so, little tip for those people is do it there, and then because my whole point is, how can you integrate all these things into the day? You're going to be drying your hands anyway. Why not introduce the humming?
There's an added benefit as well, right? It's quite nice because you're giving the benefit. I'm layering on the things that I think. So, giving that example, which made me laugh, by the way. So I can imagine you humming as the air dryer goes off. For me, they send me to sleep. So Hoovers, air dryers, that kind of white noise, and I instantly go into sleep mode. But it made me smile. And I imagine if you're doing that humming while it's on, it's going to naturally make you almost laugh to yourself, make you feel a little bit exposed in a humorous way that if someone does hear me, oh, well, I'm doing it anyway. And actually, there's a lot of health benefit and well-being benefit to having to smiling, to laughing, to humor, even if it's just to ourselves. And I know the next time, I'm guaranteed, I use an air dryer, I'm absolutely going to hum. And I'm going to laugh to myself to see, A, because it's going to remind me of your impression, and B, just in case anyone hears me. And there's other benefits to smiling.
If you want to stack it, I shake at the same time sometimes. So I'll be there. Sometimes I don't shake if there's other people in the things. I don't want to freak people out too much. But usually London, Brighton, there's always weird people around, so no one really cares too much. But yeah, shake and hum whilst you're doing the hand drying.
Shake and hum with a hand dryer. There you go. You heard it here first.
This is my point, is you can do that for free, humming for free. Like we said, walking in nature for free, walking barefoot. And actually, talking about barefoot, in the winter, it's really hard to be barefoot. But sometimes what I do is I will try, because it doesn't matter about whether it's your feet or any part of your body. So I will try and touch the tree. And I remember doing this once thinking, oh my God, I've literally become a tree hugger. Because I would be touching the bark of the tree. Now, you don't have to be so obvious like I am, where sometimes I'm standing up holding the tree, but often when you walk in woods and places like that, there are like log type trees that are, you might sit on. So when you're sitting on something like that, just put your hands on it as well. So people don't need to know you're doing it, but as long as you're getting your skin connected to some part of the earth in some way, you're going to get the benefit. Now, how long do you need to do? Ideally, like 20 minutes, but anything is better.
I've got images now. I don't know why. It's a service station of someone parking up at a service station, seeing this guy humming and shaking in the toilets, coming out of the service station and seeing the same guy now hugging a tree outside for 20 minutes while he eats his McDonald's. Yeah, there you go. But listen, we know of the two examples there, the guy in the car in McDonald's versus the Hari Kalymnios hugging a tree. Which one's going to get the better well-being benefits of the two?
Yeah.
So the other thing, we're talking about laughing, right? We've talked a lot about gratitude. I won't go back into the storytelling piece. I've covered that in a few other episodes recently, so do listen back. But it's something we can do, right? And I don't think it's something we do enough. There still seems to be a lot of resistance to cultivating gratitude on a daily basis. It can be as simple as writing down 3 things you're grateful for each day. You don't have to do it openly, although you can. And Harry does it with his family. He's got a whole WhatsApp group dedicated to it. You can do it to yourself. You don't necessarily have to write it down. You can tell it to yourself. But what we do know is all the science, all the studies, and all the, again, thousands of years of research that people have done this. Practicing gratitude can help improve overall happiness and reduce symptoms of depression and anxiety. And yet so few of us do it, and it is completely free. The other benefit, and maybe this is from my coaching mindset coming through when I work with clients, is gratitude forces you to reflect. We don't reflect enough on the day, on our actions, on our responses, on what we've heard. We react in the moment all day long, whether it's to an email, to a conversation, to a meeting, to a telephone call. Very rarely do we then sit back and reflect on those reactions. And gratitude can really also help us do that. And reflection is incredibly powerful. I'll always talk about Michael Neal's point in his book, Inside Out, which is, if we spent 30 minutes a day talking to a lamppost, how much better we would all feel, how it could really solve many of the problems that we have in this world. And I think that's something that enables us to do. When you practice gratitude, you have to reflect. You have to think about your day and maybe spend 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever works for you, to realize what we have is enough, to be in the present. Now, I did a podcast yesterday, really interesting podcast on a totally different subject. It was with 3 authors of a book called Leaders Make the Future of Work. And they were all from the Institute of the Future, right? IFTF, really bright doctorate professionals. And what they said is, and it made me think differently. I see, what does the future of work look like? Kind of those questions. And they all kind of agreed that there's no one future. There's multiple futures. We sometimes look at the world like there is only one binary way forward. It's this or it's that. And actually, we have multiple opportunities to create multiple futures for ourselves. My future is going to look different to yours, Harry. And we can change that at any moment, depending on the actions that we take today and how we reflect on those actions. So I'm interested because you work with a lot of people like this. What's the blockage that's stopping people from practicing this very free, very available, very beneficial practice of cultivating and practicing things like gratitude and reflections on a daily basis?
Honestly, one person that I wanted to involve in the gratitude practice that doesn't do it, wouldn't do it. I think they said the other day actually that I think it was overwhelmed or something like that, or that makes them feel depressed. And now they're saying this without actually having given it the 30-day go. I think they're seeing it come in to the group and it's overwhelming for them, and then they have to sit and think about something they're grateful for when they maybe don't feel grateful. So they say it's overwhelmed, but usually the clients that I've actually suggested it to have all done it, and whether they keep it up or not, but normally when we do the check-in after like 30 days or 60 days, they've been doing it and they feel amazing for it. And it's a bit like you're walking, they're thinking, why were we not doing this before? But certainly in the case of that one person, they're saying it's actually depressing and overwhelming for them to like be thinking of something, to think about being grateful for something every day when they might not be feeling happy, right? And I'm like,
There's an irony. Simon Ong in his book Energize, and this stuck with me. And actually, this is, I think we talked about this on the show before, but he says, you have to believe that this is the truth. But it'd be interesting maybe to give this passage of the book to I think I know who you're referring to. I think it's your sister, isn't it? But it's impossible to be grateful and unhappy at the same time.
Yeah, of course.
So it's interesting that she makes her feel more depressed when you think of that.
At the end of the day, look, you can lead a horse to water, right? You can't make it drink. And one of the things I learned many, many years ago is you can't be a prophet in your own land, which means the people closest to you often are the ones that are reluctant to learn from you. And one of the reasons that I decided to do things like write books, become a coach, be a speaker, is because I felt that if my closest circle saw me with other people and they're like, actually, these people are paying to see him and paying to get his advice, and maybe there's something I can learn, right? And, sometimes a family member will come to me and they've done something because someone else has told them about it, but I've been telling them about the same thing for 10, 15 years. And that's just the way it is. And that's time to accept. So for me, my job is not to try and change anyone, whether that's you, the listener, my family members. I'm just going to do me. In the first early days, 10, 15 years ago, I would be trying to push things onto people because I'm learning these things. I'm going, my God, I really want to help the people I care about. Now I've taken more of a backseat approach to it. And I'm like, I do me, they do them. If they come to me or if they, some of it rubs off, fair enough. So my job is now not to try and convince that person of joining the gratitude thing.
I'm going to go off piece. I think that's a bit of a shame, Harry. I'll be honest. There's a, as you know, I love my parables, right? And there's a parable of, and I've told this before on the show, about the Buddhist that saves the snake. And I don't think I've told you this before. There's a snake that's burning in a fire, and he reaches in to save the snake from this burning bush. That's why he's in a burning bush to save the snake, and the snake repeatedly bites him, bites. But he continues to save the snake and pulls the snake from the fire. And the people following the Buddhist turns around and says, "Why did you continue to save the snake although it continued to bite you?" And the answer was, because the nature of the snake is to bite. The nature for me is to save and help someone or something that I see that's in pain or discomfort. So he didn't allow the nature of the snake to change his nature. And if you then think about that in comparison to the Chinese proverb, which I love, which is, if you want to be happy for an hour, sleep, happy for a day, fish, happy for a year, inherit a million, but happy for a lifetime, give back to others. Although they're rejecting often your want to help them and give advice, giving back actually is one of the most powerful things we can do for our own wellness and our own well-being and our own sense of fulfillment, if you like, and achievement. So I think actually, genuinely, I feel a little bit saddened that you stopped doing that, because what you're actually doing is you're reacting to the nature of the snake and not to your own inherent nature, which is to give back and to support.
No, but here's the thing as well. It reminds me of a conversation I had with a good friend of mine a couple of days ago, and she was talking about her relationship woes, and she's been in this tumultuous relationship for like 6 years. They always seem to get on each other's nerves or whatever. And she was saying how last year, I don't know, her boyfriend was ill, and he brought up the fact that when he was a bit ill, she didn't come and help him. And then she was saying, but when I'm ill, like in the toilet throwing up or whatever, I don't want people to come in and help me. So I left him to it. And I said, this is the thing, is you gave care in the way that you expect to receive care, not in the way that he expects to receive care. It's a bit like the love languages, right? Where we give love in the way that we think that we want to receive, and therefore we'll give to our partner. And it's the same thing here, is that like that person's nature in your parable is to help people. So in a way, he's fulfilling his needs, right? His selfish needs, because it's him to help. That nature of that snake is to bite, and let it do its nature, which is to bite. And so for me, it comes down to a bit like CCC that we talk about, right? Control what you can control, cope with what you can't, and concentrate what's important. And so I can only be in control of two things in life. And I say this to my students, I say this to everyone, I've said this on the podcast before. The only thing you've got control over in life is two things: your own attitude and your own actions. That's it. Nothing else. You cannot control another person, other people's actions. You try and do that as much as you can, but really you're not in control. And so at some point, I have to decide, like, is the juice worth the squeeze? Is it worth me banging the head against a brick wall when it's hurting me and it's not benefiting the wall? It's not benefiting anyone. So I think at the end of the day, right, and I know you want to jump in here, but like I remember as well, 15 years ago when I started down this path of personal development, I had all my friends, right, my childhood friends I've known since 5 years old, 6 years old. And I wanted desperately for them to come on this journey with me and do the things and learn the things. And so I was trying to maybe thrust things onto them. But that their responsibility in life is not to follow my path and to be where I am. And so by me trying to force this was just hurting me, hurting them, hurting the relationship. And so I came to realize over 15 years of this stuff that actually, I will do what I do. They can do what they do. If they come to me, it's about basically like Gandhi's famous quote, right? Be the change you want to see in the world. So if I'm the change, right, because what you become, you attract as well, and you emanate out, then yeah, things will rub off or they won't rub off. But trying to kind of force that thing, and I know the point you're getting to is like you're still going to keep trying and trying and trying. My mum tried the same thing with my dad with smoking. 40 years, she kept saying, "Oh, and he didn't. He had to kind of come to his own desire with that." I tried a lot with my dad when it came to health, fitness, and all that. And maybe the last sort of 6 months or a year, I kind of gave up with it a little bit, but not entirely. But I just thought he was always saying to me, "Look, I just want to be left alone. I want to be happy. I want to, I don't want to spend my day exercising or whatever else, even though I'm only talking about 20 minutes. But he thinks it's like hours." And I just thought, you know what? What's most important, right? Remember the CCC, right? Concentrate on what's important. Most important thing really is that he's happy, that our interactions are happy, that not every time he sees me, he goes, "Oh, Harry's going to get me to do something fitness related or whatever." So
I can understand all that, and there's an element of in a social setting as well. Don't give advice unless it's sought. People don't always want advice unless they've requested it. I think in my own situation, me and my wife have had sometimes we've got friends or family who don't, for example, give gifts anymore at birthdays or Christmas, and she said, "Well, we should stop because they've stopped." And I've said, "But we shouldn't relate our actions based on someone else's actions. If we feel like that child should be doing it for all the others, nephews and nieces or whatever, and we believe consistency is key, then we need to continue doing it, irrespective of whether our kids get something in return." I know that's kind of a trivial example, but I think I understand all your points. Having been through a similar situation with my dad, and I was doing the same things. He bought an infrared sauna, trying to get him into those things every day, trying to get him out on his bike, and the last thing he wanted to do, you don't want him to have that moment of, "Oh, here we go again." And actually, time spent having great conversation is arguably giving a similar kind of benefits, some things we're trying to achieve anyway through the endorphins and the lack of cortisol and whatever else that will contribute to. I think where it saddens me is because of the influence of those first group of friends that refused to even be open-minded enough to accept that maybe something you were saying may benefit them. It would be a shame if that closed you down from giving the same advice to the next friend, because there may be 10 that say no in a row, but the 11th person may listen, and it could absolutely have a profound, impactful impact on their lives. And the idea that you may not share that when inside yourself that advice could be really helpful for them, I think would be a shame. And actually,
yeah.
it's one of the reasons you and I have this podcast together is because you did continue to talk openly with me, and I was open to receiving it. I didn't turn it away. We had a very good conversation. We don't always agree, which is great because we can debate openly as well. That's led us to this journey. But
Well, I think the difference is now in my approach, with the 11th friend, as you put it, is I'm using different avenues. Like this is one, right? For example, I was going to talk about it. I met with a cousin of mine. I say a cousin, but he's really my cousin's cousin, but we call each other cousins. And his dad passed away. And the last time I saw him actually was at the funeral about 2 months ago. I can't remember if I mentioned it or not. The guy was really great, 90 years old. I used to see him walking down the beach in Brighton all the time. And, I've known these guys my entire life. They, and all sorts of things. And, we had a little bit of a chat about how he was feeling yesterday, because obviously we both lost our dads. They were like really good friends as well. But I forgot to mention, because I was going to say to him, actually, maybe check in with our podcast from last year, because we've done lots of episodes. So the point I'm trying to make is the avenue I'm trying to take is slightly different now with the 11th friend.
That's a nice example, by the way, because it's their choice.
Yeah, read. Here's a book that I've written. This is why I write this is why I'm saying this is why I write the books, do the speeches. So I was talking with my mum the other day actually about Vipassana meditation, and I don't even know if she'd remembered I'd done it. And I was like, that was a huge turning point for me back in 2013. And I learned three main things. One I mentioned earlier, which is see the world as it is, not as you want it to be. And that came about because I was sat next to for 10 days this guy who had this really weird phlegmy cough thing, and it was really irritating me. And I said, well, actually, this is my work, right? I'm not going to have that great environment to be, so see the world as it is. But one of the other ones, which I've talked about all the time, is this too shall pass. And that phrase is something that you can intellectually grasp straight away, but to actually get it in your bones is a whole other thing. So rather than tell my mum about that, I actually said, oh, you know what? I did a speech competition about this entire thing. And so I put that on YouTube, and it's on YouTube, and I just played that for her. And even though it was coming from me, but it was coming from me disassociated, so it wasn't me live, it was me on the thing, is working better than me sitting there and telling her over dinner. And so I try and do it through other means now. So now, if I'm going to share something with a friend, let's say, I've got a friend whose children are autistic, or one of the child is autistic. I'm not going to suggest anything. They're not interested. A lot of parents who have children with health issues, sometimes, and I don't want to generalize here, but sometimes you're wrapped up in the identity of everything, and maybe you've tried 1,000 different things for 10 years and nothing's worked, and so you really don't want to hear about the 1,001 thing that might benefit. So I don't say it like that now. I might talk about an example of another friend of mine. This is a true example, who I hadn't seen since I was 16, and I bumped into him at a kind of a Wellbeing festival, and he now sells soap nuts. I don't know if you've come across soap nuts before.
I'm not.
So instead of using detergent when you do your washing, they're these natural nuts, and you put them in a little bag. I use them as well, and you put them in, and they're called soap nuts. And I said, "Oh, that's interesting. How did you get into all of that?" And he said, "Well, we have a child that's autistic, and I don't know what level of autism, but they decided to clean house, basically get rid of all the chemicals, all the cleaning products, whatever. And now, like 10 years later, that child is barely autistic. They said that you couldn't really tell. I don't know if that's the reason why or not, but my point is, rather than saying you should do this, I'm just recounting the story about how I met this person.
Life is about stories anyway, right?
Yeah, and it's up to them. And this is why the Bible's great and your stories are great, is because the whole point is you're not telling people what to do or what they should do. You're just saying what someone else did as part of a story, part of a conversation.
And you can take what you want from it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
that's what we love this podcast. That's why you and I are still doing this podcast 2 years on, right? We just like chatting, telling stories, communicating. And, I learn as much from you every time, even though we've probably talked about the same things over again. It's good to have it reinforced as well. Like, how many times have we talked about gratitude on this show? And yet, hopefully, maybe there's one listener today who's maybe listened to multiple episodes that after today's episode will go, actually, I will make a commitment to giving it a go. If it doesn't work, that's fine. It didn't work for me, full disclosure, but I do a different form. I do a storytelling journal, which is not gratitude, but it's my way of reflecting and writing 10 minutes a day to write down the story of the day. Maybe it'll lean into something else. I think if we can, the people that are choosing to spend an hour of their time listening to us rabbit on about different elements of wellness in our lives and our dads and all the different things, thank you for your commitment. I hope in return, we're able to give you some ideas, be it through gadgets, be it completely free, that allow you to live a more meaningful, mindful, productive, healthy life, allows you, in Harry's words, to be more superhuman. Some of these things can be as simple as fostering great social connection. Some of them can be related to mindful breathing, grounding in nature. Some of the other things we talked about, which are completely free today. Equally, if you want to expedite some of those processes and you want to biohack certain things, you can invest in supplements and gadgets, and you can measure some of those things more accurately with the support of certain things. You don't need any of that. I think for us, we're going to give 10 bits of advice and 10 things we do. And some of our listeners may only want to act on one of them. But if that one thing they act on makes a difference to their lives and makes them feel more positive about the world, for me, Harry, I think we're doing what we set out to achieve.
I mean,
it's great.
This is what I wanted to say a second ago when you were talking about people picking and choosing things. Is one of the quotes that I put in the upcoming book is by Bruce Lee, which I like, which is, right, absorb what is useful, discard what is not, and add what is uniquely yours. And I think that's the case when it comes to all of these well-being trends and health trends. And I know we're running up on time, and I just wanted to say two things, because I never finished the red light thing, but like, I'm big on red light. But
I did cut you off.
Instead of doing the red light, getting sunrise lighting, getting sunset lighting, getting daylight lighting, that's free. And the other thing I wanted to say, because the listener did mention something about us going cold turkey with our gadgets and stuff. And I did a couple of years ago, 2-3 years ago, lose my Aura Ring, right? Which is the sleep tracking device I use. And I thought at the time, so I went 2 months cold turkey with no gadget, as it were, to track. And my body's very good at subjectively knowing things. I normally predict the score that I'm going to get anyway. But what I did find is it gave me accountability. And so I decided to reinvest in the ring. I didn't need it to know what worked and what didn't work, because I know that anyway. But I found, especially being by myself, that I've got that as an accountability partner. Now, if I had a relationship, and I was in a relationship many years ago, and I found that I had more accountability when I was accountable to someone. I would eat healthier than probably what I would do without, and so on. I would exercise more than when I don't have. So as long as I have an accountability, then it works for me. So that's going to be different for everyone, whether it's a device, a person, or whether you don't need accountability at all. So that's something I would say, is that I have tried
It comes
the cold
back to the
turkey
why
stuff.
though, doesn't it? I mean, I could listen, I could take the advice, or not the advice, it's the wrong word. I could take on the challenge our listeners set, which is challenging both of us to go on a full gadget detox. But it doesn't meet my why. I'm training for a particular race and event. And for me, having access to my Watt bike, having access to my treadmill, having access to my Garmin, my heart rate monitors, and all the different things that I utilize are going to help me to measure and manage my performance on the day, to know psychologically that I can do the event, physiologically to know that I can do the event at a certain time frame at a certain pace. So my why, unfortunately, is too strong towards what I've committed to than it is to the listener's request. That's not to say I wouldn't do it at a later date, but my why needs to change. At the moment, my purpose and my why and my journey is to commit to this event, which I want to do. I've been unfit, pulled my hamstring 3 times this year. I've already moved the race once. So respectfully, I'm going to say I'm not going to take on that challenge at the moment. But this is the beauty of health and wellness anyway. I mean, Wim Hof, you mentioned earlier with the breathing, he said the cold shower is the mind's most effective medicine. That doesn't make it true. It's his perspective, his view. And that's fine for him. That's okay. You might come up with a completely different statement, Harry, about what the world's most effective medicine or the mind's most effective medicine is. And I might come up with something different again. What the reality is, we need to explore, be open, be curious, try things. Gratitude may or may not work for you, but unless... The key is a lot of people like the person you mentioned earlier had rejected the idea before they'd even tried the attempt. And I think that's where it's a shame. And both of us have tried different things, from digital detoxes right through to vegan diets to whatever. We've tried lots of things, and you kind of work out what's right for you.
You've got to go into these things with a beginner's mind. So, and sometimes I say to people at my talks, leave your current beliefs at the door. You can pick them up on the way out, but leave them at the door, because if you come in with your current beliefs, you may dismiss things because you don't agree with 1% of what I say. You dismiss the other 99%. So just leave all the beliefs at the door. You can pick them up on the way out and be open to maybe learning something new. Now, I think when I talk about in my next book, at the end of each chapter, I have suggestions, usually 3 suggestions to implement the thing. I can't think of any of the suggestions. There may be a few, but I can't think out of all the suggestions I've written that any of them cost money. That maybe some might do, but I don't think they do. And so most of my book, I'd say, will not say anything about buying infrared lights and hydrogen water bottles and water ionizers and whatever. So it's all about doing things free and accessible. Now, the flip side is people are always going to make money. You're going to buy these £100,000 red light things and hydrogen, oxygen chambers and all sorts of things, but you don't need them. You don't need it.
Let's finish on this. One thing is something you taught me, which I love, and you said leave beliefs at the door. And it was you that first said, I've never heard it said anywhere else. I don't know if it was yours or you picked it up from somewhere else, but beliefs is a lie surrounded by BS. Yeah, but lie is the word in the middle of beliefs. Love that, by the way. I've used that many times since. I think the second thing is, it's good for us to reflect on our own episodes. We have talked about a lot of gadgets, a lot of equipment that we use. There are 2 reasons for that. Number one is you and I love to connect. We both have a passion for gadgets. I have a subscription to Stuff magazine. Like, I love, not just in the world of health and wellness, by the way. I love gadgets in the world of audio, visual, computing. I'm fascinated and certified in AI. So I have a passion for gadgets across the spectrum. So knowing that you do too, it's an area of commonality that I think we just love to chat about on the show, because it's an opportunity for us to share the gadgets we're testing and gadgets we're playing with. In no way is that meant to alienate our audience. And as to reaffirm what you just said, it's in no way meaning that you have to have them. But I think it is a nice opportunity for you and I to share a shared passion for experimenting with gadgets and wellness little bits of kit to see if they work, see if they don't, have a bit of fun with it. We're lucky and fortunate that we're able to purchase some of these items through our work and through the things that we do. But yeah, that's probably why it's come through. But it's been nice to reflect, and we wouldn't have had this episode and we wouldn't have reflected at all had we not got that listener feedback. So please, if you've got any comments, go and find our Instagram channel. As I say, it's mindful_pass_podcast on Instagram, managed by one of our listeners. They will definitely share any comments that you've got with us. We'd love to address any other questions you might have. Maybe you're struggling with something, maybe you want some solutions, maybe you disagree with something we've said, want to challenge us, like we welcome it, we enjoy it. And I've really enjoyed today's conversation, Harry. So I appreciate you.
Likewise. And thank you to our listener for suggesting we talk about this. And like Nick said, if you have any suggestions, comments, questions, challenges, ping them over to us on our Instagram page. Might be the easier one, mindful_paths_podcast, and we can get back to you there and hopefully have a topic for a future show.
Absolutely. And you can get that link. I'll put it in our show notes as well for the episode, so you can pick it up from here. Good stuff. Harry, you've got an appointment to make, my friend, so I will let you go.
I've enjoyed today. Person for the toe. So
there you go. Good luck with your toe. I'm sure we'll get an update at the next podcast. All right, buddy. Take it easy.
Take care. Bye-bye.